We introduced ourselves to each other casually, with a touch of elaborate courtesy on Weitling's side, however, and took our places at the small green table. Marx sat at one end of it with his pencil in his hand and his leonine head bent over a sheet of paper, while Engels, his inseparable fellow worker and comrade in propaganda, as dignified and serious as an Englishman, made the opening speech. He spoke of the necessity for people who have devoted themselves to transforming labor to explain their views to one another and agree on a single common doctrine that could be a banner for all their followers who lack the time and opportunity to study theory. Engels had not finished his speech when Marx raised his head, turned to Weitling, and said, "Tell us, Weitling, you who have made such a noise in Germany with your preaching, on what grounds do you justify your activity, and what do you intend to base it on in the future?" I remember quite well the form of the blunt question, because it was the beginning of a heated discussion which, as we shall see, was very brief. Weitling apparently wanted to keep the conference within the bounds of commonplace liberal talk. With a serious and somewhat worried face, he started to explain that his aim was not to create new economic theories, but to adopt those that were most appropriate, as experience in France had shown, to open the eyes of the workers to the horrors of their condition and all the injustices which had become the motto of the rulers and societies to inflict upon them, and to teach them never more to believe any promises of the latter, but to rely only upon themselves and to organize in democratic and communist associations. He spoke for a long time, but to my astonishment, and in contrast to Engels, confusedly, and not too well from the literary point of view, often repeating and correcting himself, arriving with difficulty at his own conclusions, which either came too late or preceded his propositions. He now had quite different listeners from those who generally surrounded him at his work or read his newspapers and pamphlets on the contemporary economic system. He therefore lost his ease of thought and speech. Weitling would probably have gone on talking had not Marx checked him with an angry frown and started his reply. Marx's sarcastic speech boiled down to this: to rouse the population without giving them any firm, well-thought-out reasons for their activity would be simply to deceive them. The raising of fantastic hopes just spoken of, Marx continued, led only to the final ruin and not to the saving of the sufferers. To call the workers without any strictly scientific or constructive doctrine, especially in Germany, was equivalent to vain, dishonest play at preaching which assumed on the one side an inspired prophet, and on the other only gaping asses. Weitling's pale cheeks colored, and he regained his liveliness and ease of speech. In a voice trembling with emotion, he started trying to prove that a man who had rallied hundreds of people under the name of the same banner in the name of justice, solidarity, and mutual brotherly assistance could not be called completely vain and useless. Weitling consoled himself from the evening's attacks by remembering the hundreds of letters and declarations of gratitude that he had received from all parts of his native land, and by the thought that his modest spade work was perhaps of greater weight for the common cause than criticism and armchair analysis of doctrines far from the world of the suffering and the afflicted people. On hearing these last words, Marx finally lost control of himself and thumped so hard with his fist on the table that the lamp on it rung and shook. He jumped up, saying, "Ignorance never yet helped anybody." We followed his example and left the table. The sitting ended, and as Marx paced up and down the room, extraordinarily irritated and angry, I hurriedly took leave of him and his interlocutors and went home, amazed at all that I had seen and heard.